Hey guys, welcome back to Talking Sense. I thought today we'd do like a little comparison against the old Zoologist bat against the new Zoologist bat, because the old Zoologist bat is now the new Olympic Orchids Night Flyer. If that sounds confusing, check it out. So yeah, Zoologist bat originally came out a few years back, and it was put together by perfumer Ellen Covey, and basically they had a falling out, but there was a falling out between zoologist Victor Wong and Ellen Covey, the perfumer. From what I can gather that's been made public, it seemed to be around the idea that zoologists weren't too keen on buying the materials that Ellen Covey wanted them to buy. So they had like a kind of clash, and Ellen Covey basically just said, well, I'm not going to sell you the perfume anymore. Zoologist sold what they had, and Ellen Covey just took it basically, and Zoologist just discontinued it once they'd sold their stock, and bat was no more. Bat then got reformulated right now, I think it was just a couple months ago, by Prin Lomos, who is the guy from Stranger's Perfumery and Prin Parfum. Very recently, a couple of weeks ago, Ellen Covey has decided to re-release her original bat formula under her own brand, which is Olympic Orchids, which is a small independent American brand, under the name Night Flyer. So essentially, Night Flyer is the old bat. She says, Ellen Covey says, that it's precisely the old bat. So I thought today we would have a little comparison, because I happen to have the original Zoologist bat and the new Zoologist bat samples. So let's have a go and see how the new Zoologist compares to the old Zoologist and the new Night Flyer, and see which one's, perhaps more worth your money. So I think whatever happens here, really, we all win, because if you're a really big fan of the original Zoologist bat, you can now pick it up at a reasonable price, because I've seen bottles of Zoologist bat actually sell on eBay for upwards of £300 since its discontinuation. So I think it's great that it's available for you now if you're into it, if you're really into it. And zoologists are making a new perfume, so everyone wins really. So this is the original bat. The sprayer is a bit jank on it, but we'll get some out. In fact, it's not coming out, so I'm just going to dip it. I've managed to get the lid off. I'm just going to dip it, but that's all right. It all achieves the same. And then we'll give the new Zoologist bat a bit of a spray, and we'll say, I'll talk you through what I think how I think they smell, and what I think of the differences. I do think I've smelled obviously both of these. I've smelled the original Zoologist bat, obviously, and I have sprayed this one once because I was just interested. So as soon as I got it, I gave it a spray, and I'll be honest, they're very different. I thought Victor Wong of Zoologist would try and recreate the original bat quite closely. I thought that would be, more in his interest, because the original Zoologist bat was, popular, but he hasn't. He's reimagined the fragrance completely, and I would say very much completely. So to compare the note listings, the original note listing was banana, fruity notes, soil tincture, fig, tropical fruits, myrrh, resins, and green notes, with base notes of musk, leather, vetiver, sandalwood, and tonka bean. Now, the note listing for the new bat is quite different, and although it has crossover, it's slightly different. So the new note listing is fig, passion fruit, guava, soil tincture, which is the same, hay, which is different, mineral notes is different, Incense, different again. Night blooming jasmine, animal notes, oak moss, leather, teak wood, vetiver, and pebbles. So, it's pretty different. It's not even trying to be the same thing, right? So the original bat, I think is actually quite soft. And I think it's a fascinating opening. I think it's great. I get a little bit of the banana, but not loads. For me, it's more like a tropical fruit smell with a dark sort of leather and a musty kind of there is like a mineral kind of note in this one as well. You get this kind of musty, rocky cave. It does smell like a musty, rocky, damp cave. Like, I'll be honest, like it does smell that. Does have that kind of earthy, mossy, dank cave vibe to it, and I think it's really clever. But it's a lot softer and a lot less rank than you might think. So, because really the tropical fruit note for me is by far the most sort of accentuated note in this. It's the biggest note by far. So you've got this like slight banana, which is quite unusual for a fragrance, but it's slight. And then a big tropical fruit vibe, which to me smells like, I'm not sure if you have it in America, but in England, you guys from England will recognise when I say lilt. It smells like lilt, which is essentially like pineapple, grapefruit, passion fruit, like that sort of thing, like a mix of like it's a tropical fruit, like carbonated drink. So yeah, it smells like that. And that's for me like the main part of this. And then there is like a leather underneath it, which isn't too skanky or dark or dirty or anything. It's just a leather accord, really. And the interest for me is all in that kind of weird sort of minerally, stone, rocky, damp, cavernous kind of vibe that it's got. And it definitely has it, but it's not in the way. It's never in the way. It smells much more perfumey than I always expected bat would smell. It definitely is wearable for a zoologist. Well, I think all zoologists are pretty much wearable, but this is definitely, again, like, it's not super challenging. It's completely wearable. It's totally fine. Like I say, I think that's really how it smells. Like, it's quite soft, quite perfumey, a lot of tropical fruits with that kind of damp, kind of muskiness, right? So the new one, pretty different. I think it's more challenging, actually. I think Prin has done something a lot more challenging here. I'm gonna spray it again just to get that right, like the right opening again, like get that real, like when you first sort of spray it, the big kind of punchy opening. For me, it's a bit strong, and I don't like it. I find it a lot more challenging, and there's a note in there in that opening which I really dislike, and it kind of makes me kind of like that, but it doesn't hang around. It's just when you first spray it. I was trying to get it on a strip because last time I sprayed this on skin, and so I thought I wanted to respray it so I could actually see if I could get it off the strip and see what it actually was that was making that smell. But there's something in there that's sort of tangy and unpleasant. But I say, it doesn't last too long. It's kind of going away already. But again, you get some tropical fruit. But I think it's much earthier. It's much sort of like sweatier and earthier and a little bit more animalic. I definitely think it's more challenging. There's more of that soil kind of vibe there. Less of the metallic, pebbly, or I mean this one's got pebble notes, but it's less of that metallic, rocky cave and more of a sweaty, dank, sort of earth and mud kind of vibe in there in this one. This is the new one, obviously. And there's a lot less focus on the tropical fruit. It's much more an animalic filth and a slightly dirty, leathery sort of earthiness. I think it's really interesting, but I don't think it's very nice. I don't think it's very easy to wear, and in fact, this is the second time I've smelt it, and it's the first time I just banged it straight on my skin because I was thinking it's probably not going to be so different to the original bat, and I scrubbed it. I couldn't hack it. It was a scrubber for me, and I still think it's pretty gross. But it is interesting. It's well done, and it's really interesting. But it's not a very wearable perfume, I don't think. It's much earthier, it's got this real, like I say, like animalic, sweaty earth in there. It's slightly green as well. It's very slightly got like a slight green edge to it, to that kind of earthy darkness. But for me, there's always this slightly soured milk note in there that gives it a kind of like tangy, sort of yogurty, off milk kind of vibe to it. And I can't get with that. In a sense, it's almost like just really strong tropical fruit, sort of mixed with some weird kind of animalic muskiness and filth and mud. But it's it's just that the tropical fruit mix in this one. It just seems to have this weird sort of tangy, acidic vibe that sort of reminds me of off milk or stomach fluid. Really, it's not super attractive, and I don't think it's super wearable. I think it's a challenge, but but at the same time, it does have like a certain beauty in it, and it's not like I'm not enjoying smelling it. I think this is probably going to go quite quickly to the top of the tree as like one of the most challenging Zoologist fragrances, because I think it's quite interesting that Zoologist has kind of got a bit of a reputation for making challenging perfumes, and I don't think they really deserve it. I think a lot of their perfumes are not challenging at all. They're not necessarily all super wearable, but they're not particularly gross either. They're just very conceptual. This one, on the other hand, I feel is very conceptual but also slightly gross. It has that kind of earthy, animalic filth that is just a little bit too conceptual for me. It's a little bit too out there. It doesn't smell like something I would ever want to wear or even really like. It's just a bit grim. I don't want to rip on it too heavy because it's a really interesting fragrance. And it is, when it calms down, you can see it sort of drops a bit of that kind of sourness. Like it's already now starting to drop a bit of that kind of off milk sourness that it had. And I can see like, oh, okay, this is actually getting quite pretty. The bit more of that fruit's coming through, a bit more of that tropical fruit kind of vibe. But it's still very like musty, dirty earthiness. I think it's really interesting, and I do like it once it starts calming down, and I appreciate that it exists, and I think it's a really creative fragrance, but I do think it's borderline unwearable for the first sort of like 15 minutes at least, and a bit of a departure for Zoologist. I feel like this is actually one that's a bit more of their kind of out there fragrances, you know, a bit more of a move into sort of something that's really quite challenging. Which I suppose with the perfumer being print is not that much of a surprise, really. Yeah, because he's a perfumer, he's a bold perfumer, you know, he pushes like limits, I guess, in terms of like what you want to smell like. Very creative, right? So I think he's done a really good job, and I do think this is great from an artistic perspective. But I'm just not sure how much I'd want to wear it. If we go back to the other bat, so the original bat, which is now Olympic Orchids Night Flyer, this is so much easier. So much easier to wear. This reminds me much more of a Zoologist. It's like fresher, lighter, more fruity, and it feels more like a Zoologist perfume. It feels more like what they would do with their kind of conceptual ideas that are wearable, you know. Because this is really wearable. It's a lovely musty leather and tropical fruit vibe. It's that, you know, it's totally not challenging at all. It's just got a lovely bit of interest, you know. It's like a perfume that is interesting but wearable, and I think that reminds me a lot of Zoologist fragrances in general. But it's nice, but it's so much softer than the new one. The new bat for me is it's an entirely different fragrance. They're not even related. Like when you smell them step by step, they're like side by side rather, they're not related at all. The new one, so to make direct comparisons, much more leathery. The old one, much more leathery. The new one, I don't even really feel like it has much in the way of leather. It has much more in the way of like incense and sort of spiciness, and it's a bit more like a twisted, messed up Oriental, whereas this is more like a leather, and really like I feel like this is quite sort of refined in a way. It's like, yeah, like a leather, just leather and tropical fruits with some really nice, interesting, musky earthiness in there. This one, there's like this weird sort of incensey, spicy, musky, dirty filthiness with some much lighter tropical fruits, much more like airy tropical fruits, less juicy, more sort of like almost more realistic and a little bit more rindy, and less sort of satisfying in a way. Like less you wouldn't want to eat this at all. Like there's nothing in this that you'd want to eat. And it does have that kind of odd. The thing is, I can't shake that weird, odd kind of sourness on this one. I really can't. But the really big differences in terms of the fact that they're both called Bat is that this one is a hugely leathery fragrance and this one isn't. This one's really hugely like interesting with the tropical fruits, and this one is really hugely interesting with just the fact that it's really artistic and out there. But I don't think it's anywhere near as wearable as the original. I think the original is far more wearable and attractive. This is a really softly nice, attractive fragrance. This is pretty conceptual and out there. But they're not at all alike. Very different, completely different. If you've got, if you like the original Bat and you thought brilliant, Zoologist are bringing it back, stop. Like absolutely get a sample first because they're completely different. If you want the original Bat, Olympic Orchids Night Flyer, that's where you want to go to now because that's this one basically. It's exactly the same. But yeah, and if you just want to try a new fragrance and you've not tried either of the Bats, Night Flyer for me. It's all the way. I do like this one. I think it's interesting. And as an olfactory experience, I think it's more interesting than Night Flyer, but as a perfume that I would actually want to wear, Night Flyer all the way, like all the way. This is a much more wearable fragrance than this. This is not particularly attractive, and I think it's a bit of a departure for Zoologist. I really do. I think it's a very incensey, sour, strange one. But that's just not to say I don't like it. I like them both. I think they've both got qualities, but they're just very different, for very different reasons. Like I say, if I was looking for a fragrance to buy, I would look at Night Flyer. If I was looking for a fragrance just to enjoy and think that's weird, I would look at Zoologist Bat. Very weird, very conceptual, very artistic. This one, again, very artistic and conceptual, but also very wearable and pretty at the same time. So that's my thoughts on the two. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to be unbiased about it. I don't really have any particular love for the original Bat or anything like I know a lot of people sort of do have. So, I think I was pretty objective there. So, make your mind up. If you want me to do a really in-depth review where I'll wear them for the day of either of these, just let me know and I can do that. And yeah, thanks very much for watching. Cheers.